Hello, this is Steve Yorty again. I want to talk a little bit about redoing some of these brass locomotives that I've acquired, and it's really not a daunting task. I had showed before in one of my videos this Reading 282 Class M1S, which I had purchased two of these. They were unpainted. They're made by a company called Nickel Plate Products, but they're a later run from that company, and as such, they have an exquisite drivetrain and very, very smooth. I'm going to show you one of these now that's under construction. This is the chassis. You can see it has a Sagami can motor and a gearbox and a pretty nice drivetrain. It has sprung driving wheels and really operates, what I can tell so far, very, very smoothly. Now, when you convert these locomotives to DCC, and many of you probably know this, it's really not exceptionally difficult. Most of the motors are already electrically isolated, so what you have to do is remove these wires, and there's on the back, you can see that there's two wires attached. Those are both isolated from the frame, so those two wires will run out the back of your locomotive into the tender and into the decoder. And so really, aside from that, you don't have to do a whole heck of a lot wiring-wise because the motor's already electrically isolated. And so that's the chassis of one of these locomotives. This is the boiler shell that hasn't had anything done to it yet. What I end up doing typically is I drill the headlights out. Here is the boiler front. Can I get it in the picture here? I drill out the headlight, put a small bulb, or you can use an LED, and then I use 5-minute epoxy to actually hold it firmly in place and kind of to form a lens on it, and that actually works pretty good. So the two wires from this will also run out the back of the locomotive like this into your decoder. So here's the one that I've already done. You can see the front end and the headlight. So when I get these locomotives, this one obviously needs to be worked on yet. What I typically do is I clean them very thoroughly. So they come in brass like this. I then take the locomotive apart so that you have here's the tender frame for this one right here. It's been lettered. So that comes off of the frame. I take the wheels of the tender off. I do not take apart the chassis. I will paint this as is. You don't want to mess with that too much if you don't have to. What I do then is I mask where it needs to be masked, say on the bolster bearing surfaces on the tender, like what I've done here. And I then will prime the brass with something called an etching primer. I usually get an automotive primer. I can't gray colored. I can't recall where I purchased it at, but if you're very careful, you can get a very nice finish. This is the tender actually of the second locomotive here, and that's got the etching primer on it. The next step, obviously, then, which I have done on this first locomotive, is after that all dries, I then apply an airbrushed coat of grimy black paint. So this locomotive, finish-wise, this first one here, number 1739, essentially finished, other than wiring in the decoder. And its tender is likewise finished. You can see out the back of this locomotive, I have it hot wired right now. These are the two wires that come off of the motor, and I have them plugged into a DC source. And then over here you can see the two wires coming out of the front headlight that are ready for mounting. As I said, this is a very smooth running engine. You can barely hear it. And all I did was, lubricated everything, make sure everything's in the proper place. Can't even imagine that thing running down the track. I've got that on a pretty low voltage right now. Can obviously go a lot faster. But, so that's the first of my Reading 282 Mikados that I'm at a point now. The locomotive's done. What I'm going to have to do then is get the tender assembly ready and wire these wires directly into a decoder with a speaker on it. And then once everything's reassembled, to be honest, it should be pretty well ready to go. So that's the first of my brass Mikados. That's the second of my brass Mikados here, which I showed. So nothing real fancy, but I think it'll be nice. The other locomotive I could show, and I purchased this one since my previous locomotive video. This one, and I got this. I believe the manufacturer on this might be NJ Custom Brass, but this is a passenger locomotive, a 460, and once again, I think it, from what I can tell, is a very smooth mechanism, so I'll probably work on that after I'm done with these Mikados. So that's kind of where things are right now. I've got another engine here that is not related to the Reading, but I've always kind of liked the looks of them. This is a older brass model, a New York, Ontario, and Western, I believe class Y22482. This is a Pennsylvania brass M1482. There's a problem with the headlight shorting, but other than that, it's all wired up. And I need to work on that. I got an old Bowser E6442, and then some other miscellaneous engines here and there, but I like to collect these and work on them at my leisure. But my main focus now is these Reading Mikados, and I'm hoping that they'll be a good addition. I will say that the first one I purchased had already had a lot of added weight into the boiler, so it's actually fairly heavy. This one here, I actually added some weight there, and then there's a big weight in the front, so that's reasonably heavy, so hopefully it'll be able to pull pretty well. But I'm pretty pleased with how this 282 turned out. So anyway, I'm no expert on painting or finishing models, but it's got a real smooth finish. It looks real nice, and I'm pretty good with it, and I'll probably just keep doing things the way I've done them for a while when it comes to refinishing these. What I typically do with the chassis when I paint it is I will hook this up to a DC power pack like this MRC pack and have the wheels turning slowly, and then what I do is I'll just airbrush. Obviously I airbrush the front part, it's all brass, and then I'll airbrush the wheels and drivers and just everything. I'll put probably some masking tape sort of around the motor and the gearbox, but that way everything gets a coat of paint. It's a heck, you won't get paint on the bottom surface, obviously, doing it like that, but it gives a pretty nice, at least from when you look at the locomotive, you don't see really any brass shining through, and it's a heck of a lot easier in disassembling this thing driver by driver, which I wouldn't recommend doing that. So anyway, when I get these together, I'll try to run them up at the layout. So thanks a lot. Have a good day.